In the 5th century, the Roman world, teetering on the brink of collapse, looked to the east with terror. From the vast, unknown steppes of Eurasia, a shadow was falling across civilization. They were a people born in the saddle, a whirlwind of horse and bow that moved with the speed and fury of a storm. They were the Huns. And their leader was a man whose name would become a curse on the lips of emperors and popes, a name synonymous with destruction and divine punishment. Attila. History remembers him as the Scourge of God, a barbarian warlord who brought an empire to its knees. But was he merely a savage bent on plunder? Or was he a brilliant, unifying leader who forged one of history's most feared, yet least understood, empires? To find the man behind the myth, we must journey back into the heart of a chaotic and changing world. The Huns were not a monolith. They were a confederation of nomadic tribes, masters of mounted warfare. The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus described them as being so prodigiously ugly and bent that they might be two-legged beasts. This was Roman propaganda, born of fear. In truth, their hardened lifestyle made them formidable. Their greatest weapon was the Hunnic composite bow. A marvel of engineering made from wood, horn, and sinew, it could outrange and outpower any bow in Europe. Fired from horseback, it allowed them to unleash devastating volleys of arrows, retreat before an enemy could respond, and attack again. This tactic, the feigned retreat, would shatter the discipline of even the feigned Roman legions. Before Attila, the Huns were a fragmented but potent force, raiding the frontiers of Persia and Rome. They lived and died by the horse, carrying their wealth with them, their only homes the felt yurts they could pack and move in a day. They had no cities, no grand monuments. Their kingdom was the open steppe, and their law was the will of their strongest chieftain. Into this world, around 406 AD, Attila was born. We know almost nothing of his childhood, only that he was raised in the brutal school of Hunnic life. He learned that power was not inherited, but taken. In 434, Attila and his brother Bleda inherited joint leadership of the Hunnic Confederation. Together, they were a terrifying force, blackmailing the Eastern Roman Empire into paying a massive annual tribute of gold to keep them from raiding their lands. But for a man like Attila, sharing power was a temporary arrangement. In 445 AD, Bleda was dead. The ancient sources are vague, some say he died in a hunting accident, others whisper of assassination. Whatever the truth, Attila now stood alone, the undisputed master of the Huns. He wasted no time. With charisma and brutal efficiency, he united the disparate tribes under his single banner. He was no longer just a chieftain, he was the king of a new and terrifying empire, an empire that stretched from the Ural Mountains to the Rhine River. With Bleda gone, Attila turned his unified might upon the Eastern Roman Empire. Claiming the Romans had violated their treaty, he unleashed a campaign of unprecedented destruction across the Balkans. City after city was leveled. The Romans, under Emperor Theodosius II, were forced into a humiliating new treaty, tripling their tribute payment. Attila had become the master of extortion. But his gaze soon turned west. And his pretext for war would come from the most unlikely of sources, a rebellious Roman princess. Justa Grata Honoria, sister of the Western Emperor Valentinian III, was being forced into a marriage she despised. In a desperate plea, she sent her signet ring to Attila, begging him to rescue her. Attila chose to interpret this as a proposal of marriage, and demanded half of the Western Roman Empire as her dowry. When the Romans refused, Attila had his excuse. In 451 AD, he led a colossal army across the Rhine into Gaul. His goal was conquest. He was met by his old acquaintance and now bitter rival, the brilliant Roman general, Flavius Aetius, who had forged a fragile alliance with the Visigoths. The two forces met on the Catalaunian Plains in one of the largest and bloodiest battles of antiquity. It was a brutal, swirling melee of Romans, Goths, Franks, Huns, and Ostrogoths. The battle raged all day, a tactical stalemate that cost tens of thousands of lives. Attila was stopped, but not defeated. He had suffered his first major setback, but his ambition was far from quenched. The next year, 452, Attila sought revenge. He invaded Italy, the heartland of the Western Empire. He laid siege to the city of Aquileia, and when it fell, he razed it so completely that a generation later, no one could find where it had stood. Panic gripped Italy. The road to Rome lay open. As Attila's horde advanced, Emperor Valentinian III fled. It seemed nothing could save the Eternal City. But then, an unarmed delegation went north to meet the Hunnic king. It was led by a man of faith, not a man of war, Pope Leo I. The meeting at the Mincio River is shrouded in legend. Christian sources claim Saints Peter and Paul appeared in the sky with swords, terrifying Attila into submission. The reality was likely more practical. Pope Leo offered Attila a vast sum of gold. Furthermore, Attila's army was suffering from famine and disease, and Aetius' forces were regrouping to harass his supply lines. For reasons we will never fully know, Attila turned his army around and left Italy. He had spared Rome, but the terror he inspired had cemented his name in history, Flagellum Dei. The Scourge of God. Attila returned to his great camp on the plains of Hungary, planning to once again attack the Eastern Romans. In 453 AD, he took another wife, a beautiful young woman named Ildiko. Following a night of heavy celebration, Attila retired to his wedding tent. He would never emerge alive. He was found the next morning, dead from a severe nosebleed that had choked him in his sleep. The most feared man in the world had died not on the battlefield, but in his bed. The shock was immense. His empire, a force of nature held together by his will alone, did not survive him. His sons fought amongst themselves for control, and the vassal tribes Attila had conquered saw their chance. In a great uprising culminating in the Battle of Nidao, the subject peoples, led by the Gepids, shattered Hunnic power forever. Within a single generation of Attila's death, the Hunnic Empire vanished from history as quickly as it had appeared. So what is the legacy of Attila the Hun? For centuries, he was the archetype of the savage barbarian, a force of destruction that threatened to extinguish the light of civilization. And without question, his campaigns were brutal, leaving a trail of devastation across Europe. But he was more than that. He was a political and military genius who forged a multi-ethnic, nomadic empire through sheer force of personality. He understood the weaknesses of the fractured Roman world and exploited them masterfully. He was a nation builder, just not in a way the Romans recognized. His conquests dramatically accelerated the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. He forced disparate groups to unite against him, redrew the ethnic map of Europe through the migrations he caused, and inadvertently helped create the foundations of medieval kingdoms. Attila the Hun remains a figure of contradictions, a terrifying destroyer to his enemies, a charismatic leader to his people. The Scourge of God was not a mindless storm, but a man who wielded the storm with purpose. His empire was as ephemeral as a flash of lightning, but its thunder continues to echo through the halls of history.